Ready.
officially start now. Here we go. And
Hello,
action.
Matthew.
Go.
Well, it's great to see you here. The first time I saw you was because someone in South Africa said to me, if you ever get the chance to meet this guy, he's got something valuable to teach. And I went in quite skeptical, and I walked away. I walked away feeling like I'd been to some kind of gospel service because it was just so incredibly energizing. I used to be in that kind of zone, but no. What I'm saying is, I walked away completely energized, and I felt that there was something really different about what you were doing, and that cuts into so many aspects of the acting life. Um, so to start with, how long have you been doing this? Who are you? I mean, why did you get into
Oh,
it? You know?
it's funny, hey, because if I talk about acting,
Yeah.
I just passionate, connected, just I have so much to say. As soon as somebody says talk about yourself, I get all okay, well, like my ego gets flared up, my insecurity. Anyway, I I come to you, and I probably don't even we know each other quite well, but maybe we've never really talked biographies. I come to acting not naturally at all, whereas my wife, Michelle, comes to acting. She came out of the womb tap dancing and singing, and
Mhm.
was in church plays at 2 years old, and she was already like the high school drama queen. And so, but me, I think I graduated university and had maybe seen a play. I was not really into movies. Like it was not my thing. I didn't know anything about the acting world. I was I was political philosophy major. I briefly worked for the Canadian government and got fired in the spy agency. That's a whole other story. And but I was a musician. I'm a classical piano player, pianist, and I'm a singer. And I sang tenor in choirs. And I was not, I was a very passionate young man in my 20s, and I wanted to change the world. And I had these philosophic ideas about like ending the monetary system. And I was like reading philosophy books on how to change the world and all this. And I was very frustrated by the whole political system. And I was basically just on a one-way road to being a diplomat that's just regurgitating whatever your government wants.
Bitcoin beat you
And
to it.
what's that?
So Bitcoin beat you to it.
Yeah, Bitcoin beat me to it. Yes, yeah. Well, I was the other way around. I was looking at a much more communistic system and things, and I was a rebel. And then uh, uh, I was singing in a choir, and the guy next to me was the artistic director. He's still a good friend of mine. He lives in New York City. He was the artistic director of a theater company in Montreal, and he was asking me out, and I said, James, I don't play on your team. And then when I found out he was artistic director of a theater company, I was like, oh, actresses. So I thought, can I go paint some backdrops and hang out? And I really was about meeting girls. And then so I go to this theater company, and it was so much fun. And these people were so dynamic and expressive and artistic and exciting. And it was a world I knew nothing about. And I was quite literally painting backdrops and hanging curtains and hanging out with actors. But I'm a singer, and I'd learned the whole show. And it was Sondheim's company, and their lead had booked a TV series a week before opening and pulled out of the show. And they didn't have a lead. And they pointed to me and they say, Matthew knows the whole show and he can sing and he looks just like him. Do you remember being alive, somebody only too close? And so I'm like, great. And then I get on stage. I think I was probably quite terrible, but there was a moment on stage during that show that I can remember specifically. And we're talking about 1991 or something, 1990. I'm standing on stage and I disappeared and a voice spoke through me and the audience was moved. And there was a power to it that I went, you could never do this with politics.
Mm,
What art can do is so much
mm,
more effective and specific. And then in the crowd was this playwright relatively famous American playwright, African American man named Dr. Frederick Douglass Ward, and he came to me and said, "You're a terrible actor, but you got something." And so I became his assistant, and then he helped me get to New York City, and then I moved to New York, and then I studied and I became an actor. Was this the question? I can't remember. I'm just talking to myself now. And then what happened is I'm in New York City, and I was a poor kid. I don't come from wealth, so I had to hustle. So I learned quickly how to market yourself in theater, and I did pretty well the first 2, 3 years. I was actually off Broadway, and I toured with the National Theater, and then I met my wife in Seattle
What were
on
you
one of the
touring with?
tours. I was touring with the National Theater. What shows were I touring? We were doing classical theater. So we were doing.
Were you in rep?
Yeah, it was a classical touring rep show. So we did Moliere's Tartuffe and Moliere's The Miser and Much Ado About Nothing and things like that. It was all classical. And then I end up in Seattle and I played Hamlet at the Washington Shakespeare Festival. And that was a summer rep. We did, oh my gosh, I can't remember now. Anyway, the Lion in Winter and Hamlet. And so I met Michelle and then never went back to New York City. She was a West Coast girl, and we were in LA and started doing the Vancouver, Los Angeles thing. And then I switched into film and TV. But about 20 something years ago, right before Michelle and I were getting married, so that's 24 years ago, a friend of mine booked a job, and he called me and he said, "Hey, come teach my acting class." And I was like, "Teach your acting class? I don't know what to do that in." And I took it really seriously. And there was a moment in teaching long time ago, and I was teaching, I'm sure, absolutely appallingly and like a terrible act teaching. But there's a moment in teaching that I had the same explosive moment that I had on stage the first time I was on stage, where I went, "This is how you can affect the world. This is how you can really affect that change." So I look back now at my life. When I was living my life, it felt like I was on so many different dead end roads and turns. But now I look back at my life and I go, "Oh, it was a straight line. It was a straight line to what I do." From politics to stage to film to teaching, you go, "Oh, this is what I was meant to do." So that's how I became a teacher. And I love teaching more than anything. I can give up acting, but I could never give up teaching.
When did you start? How long has it been now?
As a teacher?
Yeah.
So that class that I took subbed was like 1997, because we were married in 98. And then that became a full-time gig at this school. And then I had real problems with the way that school was run. Ethically, I thought they were one of those schools that teaches anything and takes the money fast, you know? So I quit that school and I got hired by the William Davis Center, which was a good school. I don't think they're around anymore. And I taught there for a couple of years, but they didn't pay very well. You ready for this? They didn't pay very well, Ashley. So I said, "Okay, here's the deal. I'll take your pretty horrible wage, but in exchange, I can teach anything I want. Like, I'll just teach anything I want." And I actually did these emotional classes. I was researching. It was really amazing when I look back and go, "Wow, the fortitude to do that," or foresight. But I would have actors come in and I'd say, "Look at the scene. Let's figure this out emotionally. Where would you come from?" And I was trying to figure out what is emotion. And I have people run across the room crying, screaming things out. And we had lists on the wall. We write it down. And it was 18 months of this class when I came to the realization that there's 3 things that mean anything to anybody. What do you want out of life? Who do you love? And what do you believe in? And that's it. And so I actually worked that out in that class, like on that school's dime, basically. So
I mean,
right.
I know. I mean, when I've walked into that workshop and those are the questions that you posed, they're big questions and they're really searching questions.
Oh yeah.
And it really, I mean, that was the time when I wanted to just walk out because it got quite scary. And I think that's the point, that
Yeah.
you're putting people in that place, and then it gets even scarier because then the emotion really starts cutting, and
Oh
you get to a place where you're with someone, and this was the thing that really really started making more and more sense for me is working in pairs and looking at the other person and um, finding the life from the other person,
Hmm.
and knowing that that's doing something inside me, that I wouldn't have if I didn't have that partnership. Which brings me on to another question here. In this age of plague infested um, COVID lockdown,
Hmm.
people are solitary, they're feeling alienated. How do you get to that point? I mean, how do we get to that point where um, we felt energized being in a group and with a partner, and yet here we are at home? I know that we have access to Zoom. I know that there are ways of working around it. Um, but is there something else that can reach down and you know help us to find that kind of emotionality that you teach? What have you seen during this time where people are actually accessing it?
I mean, oh, that's a big question. On the one hand, you absolutely cannot and never will be able to replace the human factor of having two human beings opposite each other working together. So um, one just keeps hoping and praying that none of these strains, these variant strains, are going to take root, and that we're going to get a nice vaccinated population, and we'll be able to get back to living our lives. Um, However, we have to deal with what we've got. So knowing that it's not an ideal situation, you then start to go explore and say, how else can we do this? And the virtual classes have been extraordinary, and people have really burst through. And there are quite a few actors I have online now, all around the world, which is cool, who have come to class, didn't really know how to act, now can act, weren't very emotionally present or available, are now emotionally expressive, connected to character, and charming and giving and charismatic and connected and doing this incredible work. And I've never met them personally. I've never actually met them. And they're doing a scene. I have a woman in San Francisco doing a scene with a guy in London. And you'd swear absolutely that they've known each other for 20 years, that they're in love. Like I have two actors doing the scene from Marriage Story, and one is he's a New York actor, but he's in Boston, Massachusetts, and she's in Cape Town. And you are convinced that they've been married for 10 years and have had children, but they've never met. And it becomes, it's the power of acting, right? And so someone said to me, well, you can't possibly convey emotion and connection two-dimensionally. And then my response to that is, except that's what we do for a living. And not only that, but over time, I can watch Meryl Streep in anything, in Bridges of Madison County, right? I'm looking, I think you did that scene, didn't you? Anyway, Bridges of Madison County, I can watch Meryl Streep in that scene, and she makes me weep. And I'm pulverized by her humanity, and I can feel the humanity coming out of my screen, except that it's two dimensions, and it's also 35 years ago. So somehow human emotions break a time-space barrier, that you can be emotionally affected and connect with a human being through this rather simplistic two-dimensionality. You can. So the classes are so I think in some ways I feel like the actors who are working virtually, when they get on stage or when they get on a sound stage, a set, and they're working with an actual actor, they're going to find it a cakewalk, like incredibly easy. Wow, you're actually here, because they've had to work for now almost 12 months. How do I get through this thing to connect to you? And so they have to work much harder, I think, right now. So in some ways, I think it's actually a boon. There's a lot of so I'm not worried about people's emotionality or connecting with each other. There is something about the physical connection with another human being that's being lost, and that'll be very interesting to see how that pays out. So we'll get people back into a physical class. Like I'm really enjoying teaching on Zoom a lot, and I have a lot of Cape Town actors, because you're from Cape Town. I have a lot of Cape Town actors online, and I'm working with them, and it's extraordinary. But there are some actors that after a while I just feel frustrated. Like I need to have this person in front of me so that I can physically contact with them. So yeah, there's I don't pretend, to summarize, I don't pretend that the virtual world is stunningly wonderful, but in some odd little ways it's better. And in general, it's much better than not having connection. So,
I was just pulling up an email here from a casting director in LA. I don't know if you know Riza Bramon Garcia,
hmm,
but
no.
she's been saying, I've been casting for 38 years and never in my wildest dreams did I ever think that the pandemic protocols and shutdowns would be a part of the work. She goes on about how many thousands are being spent on productions and hours on Zoom. Um, for anyone starting to pursue an acting career before March, none of this was your reality. The industry changed in a flash, and now being an actor means doing many different things from the things you did before. But for the actors whose auditions are moving me, all the changes are gifts. These are new opportunities to grow, to offer their hearts in different ways. Actors who are succeeding know that no matter how their work is presented, the basic principles of their craft, presence,
Mhm,
vulnerability, listening, connecting, truthful emotion,
mhm,
has not changed. In fact, they're more important now than ever. We need your humanity right now.
mhm.
Which is a
Yeah,
nice thing
that's
to end.
beautiful. That's
Yeah.
lovely. You may have to send that to me. That's great. And I agree
Ah,
with every syllable of that. Um, my fear for actors, my worry for actors who are growing up post pandemic, I don't know if that's correct. There are young actors, I'm working with some of them, who basically have only started acting class or studying since that last year. So their only experience, or they're only hitting the market, the industry now. So their only experience is this: self-taping,
mm,
virtual auditions. And there is a magnificent, vital, and terrifying aspect to acting, which is being lost, which is fear. And that fear, that adrenaline, that excitement, that I'm standing on in an audition room and it's my second callback and there's four people behind a desk and one of them is a very famous producer and there's the director and they're like, thanks for coming in, thank you, and you're physically in a moment where they go, okay, here we go, and now perform, and you have to deliver in front of people live is an extremely important part of what we do, be it 801 on Broadway, or Matthew, you can come in now, or okay, here we go, we're ready to go, cameras are rolling, and you're on set. There's an aspect of the live presentation
mm,
that's being lost. So I'm watching some of these young people, and their self-tape is, I just was talking to one kid right now. He's lovely, and he's auditioning for this show, and he's actually been booking some stuff, but he's basically a COVID generation actor, and so he's got his self-tape, and it's really good. But at a certain point, I go, so how many takes was that? And they're like, oh, my dad and I ran it like 58 times, and it's you can choose
yeah.
when's I'm best at 7 p.m. That's when I feel the best. And I'm ready now. And my dad and I will run it 60 times and it'll be perfect. And I go, yeah, that's not how it works. How it works is you're sitting there opposite a very famous star, and then the director comes over and goes, right, so we have 16 minutes until we're at 12 hours. So we're just going to shoot your close up and your medium at the same time. You get about one take. Don't fuck this up. Like that's happened to me many, many times. Like many times. I've probably heard "don't fuck this up" like 8, 9 times in my career. And you're like, and you go and you vomit a little bit, and you start shaking, and then you breathe through it, and then you hit it just like you did when you were behind the curtain and it's 8 o'clock.
Right.
And so the live performance aspect is being lost, and that's not, they're gonna suffer, those actors are gonna suffer if they don't learn that they're here to serve when called upon.